Hey, everybody. Just want to give you the update from Washington, D.C. this week, what happened. First, we had the President's State of the Union address on Tuesday evening. I'm sure you're aware of that. We'll talk about that a little bit. We also had the National Prayer Breakfast this week, which is if you've never seen it, you can check it out online. An incredible gathering of people of faith from around the world in Washington, D.C. About this time every single year. We also had two committee meetings for the first time. Of course, I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee as well as Foreign Affairs. Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, we talked about the Highway Trust Fund and what happens once it runs out of funding in 2020 and what the plan is to deal with that. We also talked in Foreign Affairs about the United States actions in Yemen vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia. Also, a big week, I introduced two bipartisan pieces of legislation. We can talk about that a little bit. And also voted on a bill regarding child care for veterans that are seeking appointments for mental health illnesses and associated things like that. So also we've received a bombshell report out of the State Department regarding the United Nations Relief Workers Agency, which is someone I've been critical of for some time because your tax dollars have been spent, in my opinion, and the evidence bears it out, to pay for, among other things, textbooks that espouse and promote terrorism in the Holy Land. And finally, the report came out that indeed the State Department had misled Congress, had literally lied to Congress, and told us that what was happening wasn't happening, which is our tax dollars in the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent to indoctrinate Palestinian children against Jewish folks. And so the report was classified. It took us about 9 months to get it declassified. When I say us, myself and a member of Congress from the 1st District of New York, Mr. Lee Zeldin, but it was unclassified, and the report shows that indeed the Department of State over many years has lied to Congress about what has happened with our tax dollars in regard to textbook purchases by the Palestinian Authority and what is included in those textbooks and the messaging and so on and so forth. So I think this buttresses the president's actions earlier in his term to stop funding the United Nations Relief Workers Agency for reasons just like this. We don't want our tax dollars being spent to indoctrinate children towards terrorism or to promote any terrorism, and now we have the proof that was happening. The State of the Union, among other things, if you didn't see it, just some things that I think are great for all of us, regardless of what your political stripe is. 304,000 jobs added in January, which is almost essentially double what the predicted number was. We see that worker pay and benefits rising at the fastest pace in 10 years. And also the U.S. Stocks post the best January in 30 years. So this is all due in part to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed in the last session, and the results of which are finally coming to fruition, which is increased employment, increased economic activity, and finally we're seeing wages. It takes some time, but finally we're seeing wages starting to tick up, which is great for all of us. The two bills that I introduced regarding a horrific subject that I can't imagine in the 21st century that I'm talking to you about, but I introduced them on the floor, and you can go check that out. You can see that on our website. It's in regard to female genital mutilation, which happens, unfortunately, too often in the world. About 200 million women and girls alive today are survivors of female genital mutilation. Well, you can just check it out online. It's just a horrific practice, a horrific cultural practice, and we've had our eye on it for a long time now, and it's finally happening in the United States, and that's what really spurred my action, because there was a case where somebody was little girls were transported across state lines to have this thing done. They were brought to the authorities, and unfortunately, the law was stricken down as unconstitutional. So, in effect, the people that performed this, including the parents of these little girls that were complicit in it, weren't punished on a federal basis. So we've taken actions to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and that this practice not only doesn't happen in the United States, but that we highlight this practice and how horrific it is, and make sure it ends all around the world. So we've had great bipartisan support. The two bills are the Protect Our Girls Act, which is H.R. 959, and Empower Our Girls Act, which is H.R. 60. Correction, H.R. 960. And what that does, what H.R. 960 does, the Empower Our Girls Act, is it allows grants under the Violence Against Women Act to be used to help some of these ladies and just young girls that have been afflicted by this mutilation that's happened to their bodies. We want them under the Violence Against Women Act to be able to avail themselves to those services that are covered under that. So those are the two bills, and we hope to see some floor and committee action on them in the very near future. Again, we had the two hearings, one on Yemen and the United States actions in Yemen. And just to be clear, what we're doing is supporting the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen to fight the Iranians and the rebels that are operating in this country as unfortunately a proxy war. There's I guess a feeling in some circles that we have boots on the ground in Yemen, and that we should not, and we don't have any boots on the ground. So, but that was what the hearing was about there. Well, I said we don't have any boots, and we don't have any combat forces there engaged in combat operations. We do have American service support there, assisting in targeting and in some material support, but no combat operations in Yemen for the United States of America. And the other one was on the House Transportation Committee, which is dealing with the surface transportation funding. We've got to deal with our highways, our roadways, our bridges, just our infrastructure in general, ports, airports, and broadband cable, water, sewer, you name it. Stormwater. We've got to deal with that, and we're running out of funding. And so the hearing was in effect to deal with that as we get into the new session. So the other thing that happened, with what has happened with the state law in New York, which we're calling post-abortion. I don't know what, it's just it's extreme late term abortion, essentially when the child is born alive, and then they're talking about infanticide, which is killing the unborn child, or if a child survives an abortion, we're taking actions in the House of Representatives to say that will not stand. Now, we were blocked. Republicans had a motion to protect infants and infants born alive during abortions, and the motion was blocked by the majority party. So we're going to continue to demand that we deal with that. That will be House Resolution 102, the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. And so we're going to continue to work on that. We also passed H.R. 840, the Veterans Access to Child Care Act, which I mentioned in the beginning of the update. So that's kind of what's going on in Washington this week. That's what did go on. And hopefully have another update for you soon. Oh, let me just bring you up to date on negotiations regarding the border wall funding and Homeland Security funding. That is ongoing throughout the weekend. It's my understanding that the conferees will be at Camp David trying to work out a deal. We hear that they are making progress, and so we're thinking that there might be some floor action next week, where the House would vote on something and send it to the Senate, and thus avoiding another shutdown, and yet also at the same time hopefully dealing with border security. And finally, long-term Representative John Dingell passed away, and we send our condolences to his family. His wife is now representing the same district, and I'm sure that this is a tragic time for her and their entire family. So we send our condolences to the Dingell family and wish them well, and we expect services to be next week. We hope that your family is well, and that's the update for this week. So be safe, and God bless you till next week.